By now, you've all heard of Italian Wine Unplugged 2.0, the latest book published by Mama Jumbo Shrimp. It's more than just another wine book. The fully updated second edition was inspired by students of the Vinitaly International Academy and painstakingly reviewed and revised by an expert panel of certified Italian wine ambassadors from across the globe. The book also includes an edition by Professore Attilio Scienza, Italy's leading vine geneticist. The benchmark producers feature is a particularly important aspect of this revised edition. The selection makes it easier for our readers to get their hands on a bottle of wine that truly represents a particular grape or region. To pick up a copy, just head to Amazon.com or visit us at mamajumboshrimp.com. For all the super wine geeks out there, we have a special new series dedicated to you. We are reading excerpts from our new edition of Italian Wine Unplugged 2.0. Wine lovers, tune in for your weekly fix only on Italian Wine Podcast. If you want to own a copy of this new must-read Italian wine textbook, just go to Amazon.com or visit us at mamajumboshrimp.com.
Domestic and wild grapevines can be distinguished by morphological differences concerning leaves, flowers, and fruits, although in most cases the distinction of wild grape is hindered by gene flow between the two subspecies. The wild grapevine is a dioecious flowered liana that grows in North Africa, Europe, and in the Near and Middle East in areas between 30 degrees and 50 degrees north latitude. In Central and Eastern Europe, it thrives in mixed deciduous forests at warmer southern exposure and wetter forests, Rhine valleys, the Loire, the Rhine, the Danube, etc. While in the Mediterranean region, it is found mainly in riparian forests, pure or mixed populations dominated by poplars, oaks, elms, ash, and elder. In areas with shallow water, pioneer shrub communities with tamarisk and oleander along the terminal stages of waterways. Currently, wild grapevines have become quite rare due to anthropization of natural spaces, habitat destruction and fragmentation, lodging, spread of pathogens, powdery mildew, phylloxera, and hybridization with domestic forms. Botanical classification of wild and cultivated grapes is far from simple. Alexander Negrul, a student of the Russian agronomist Nikolai Ivanovich Vavilov, proposed an ethnographic division of cultivated vines between Pontica georgica, which includes typical Caucasian wine grapes, Pontica balcanica, and Orientalis, which includes varieties representative of the Western Mediterranean basin. The origin of Western European wine grapes is explained in two hypotheses. One is represented by reciprocal gene flow between introduced varieties of Eastern origin and local wild populations. The other is one in which cultivated grapes have two origins, one in the East and the other in the West, where European vines originated from independent domestication events of Eastern wild vines. Vine varieties are the result of a twofold relationship from nature to man, the wild vine, and from man to nature, the vine obtained by domestication or by selection of spontaneous crosses, the consequence of a variety of actions and reactions, confused and repeated in everyday life in very small spatial ranges. The domestication and spread of the grapevine have been the subject of much study. After the first vine domestication event in the Caucasus, cultivated vines spread southward to Anatolia and Egypt 5,000 years ago, to reach major civilizations around the Mediterranean. The North African route to western Sicily, Sardinia, and southern Spain was led by the Phoenicians, the Balkan route to Italy and southern Europe by the Greeks, followed by the significant contribution of the Romans to Central Europe and to Northern Balkans. However, more recent exchange of vine material in other directions, even the opposite direction, has made this pattern less accurate. Often, the same varieties were present in different areas under different names, and this sometimes makes pedigrees difficult to reconstruct, along with overlapping generations due to crossing events between ancient ancestors, local wild vines, and modern varieties. In addition, some ancient varieties may have disappeared or are no longer grown or have been replaced by others as a result of disease, such as phylloxera outbreak, or due to the changing demand of the market. It all began in the area between the South Caucasus, the Northern Crescent, and the Levant, with the first domestications of local wild grapevines about 8,000 year BC. Westward, dispersal began very early through human migrations, and varieties were differentiated for table use or for winemaking. In the eastern Mediterranean, domestication of wild grapes dates back 4 millennia, while in Western Europe it is closer to 2 millennia. The genetic identity of the best plants that arose from spontaneous crosses was preserved by vegetative propagation, the first paleogenomic documentation of which dates back about 1,000 years ago. For example, the Sabanin. During its spread through the western Mediterranean regions, the grapevine has increased its genetic variability through the contribution of multiple local germplasms or through progressive human selection. Several studies support the presence of centers of secondary domestication where spontaneous hybridizations between cultivated forms and local wild plants, or direct selection, generated the pattern of modern Western European cultivars. Recent research reconstructed the evolutionary history of the wine grapevine in Europe through the identification of the gene that may have been decisive in the transition from wild to cultivated vine, as it was responsible for the increase in berry size and thus the subject of selection by humans. This discovery shows that all cultivated vines derive from a single domestication event that occurred in the Caucasus, present-day Georgia, from which table grape varieties were initially derived, and from which wine grape varieties were later brought to Europe. In Italy, the localization of varieties across the country has more cultural than geographical parallels, in that the contribution of genetic material of Eastern origin has been more significant than in other areas important to viticulture. In France, for example, the role of domestication of wild grapevines in the formation of grape varieties has been more influential than in Italy, where only the Enancio, also known as jagged leaf Lambrusco, and Lambrusco di Sorbara, have shown a genome resulting from a cross between cultivated and wild vines.
Italian Wine Podcast, brought to you by Mama Jumbo Shrimp.
In the gene pool of the vine grown in Italy, 4 ancestral contributions are recognized. That is, 4 ancient vine populations that humans in the very distant past helped to select and then mix. In addition, it has been found that some of the most widespread and valuable varieties of grapevines, generally varieties from Central and Northern Europe, such as Ramina, Sauvignon, Riesling, Pinot, Cabernet, and Merlot, derive from crosses between cultivated vines brought from the East and wild European vines. It is precisely these hybridization events that have occurred independently several times in Europe that justified the use of the term autochthonous to refer to those varieties that we consider to be native to a particular country or region, but which actually have their roots further back in the countries where the species were originally domesticated. The triangle of acclimatization in Magna Grecia, where it all began. Magna Grecia is considered one of the areas that represents Europe's oldest winemaking tradition. In fact, it is believed that this region was one of the most important centers for the spread of viticulture in the Mediterranean basin, not only because of the contribution of Greek colonization, but because it is role as a secondary center of vine domestication. The family trees of varietal relationships, reconstructed through genetic comparisons, correspond closely to the affinities between linguistic origins. These family groups indicate that grape varieties of Calabrian, Apulian, Campanian, and Sicilian origin have contributed to creating the existing grape varieties of central southern Italy. These key grapes were witnesses to the oldest viticulture of Magna Grecia and are the founding grapes varieties of our enological history. Because of its shape, the cultural space where this history began is called the Triangle of Acclimatization and includes part of eastern Sicily, southern Campania, and Tyrrhenian and Ionian Calabria. Analyzing the kinship relations between some minor vines of Magna Grecia and varieties of Greek origin, we find synonyms such as Beccari and Muscatidruni bianco, Angulato and Mavrodaphne, Stephidampellos and Juvarello, Mennella nera di Egua, and Zinaricu di Ferruzzano, which indicates that once introduced in Italy, many vines were propagated by local people, and with the passing of the years, their names were changed. By a later process of varietal circulation, some of these vines moved to a distant territory, where they underwent further name changes. For example, Nerello Cappuccio from Etna is cultivated in Sardinia, and Oltralpe under the name Carignano. Nerello Mascalese is known in the old vineyards of the province of Reggio Calabria as Nerello or Negrello, and in Ionian Calabria as it is synonym with Sangiovese. Just like Puttanella and Vigna del Conte and Cela Cela, which are known as Preventivo and Corinto Nera in Sicily. Moscato Bianco from Piedmont is known as Moscato di Basilice in Campania and in France as Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain. Bracao and Malvasia are cultivated in Campania under the appellations of Nerella and Sanguinella, just as one grape is known in Sicily as Grecanico and in Veneto as Garganega. Alicante, from the Tyrrhenian coast and Sicily, is known under the appellations of Cannonau, Garnacha, Grenache, and Tokai Rosso, respectively in Sardinia, Spain, France, and Veneto. Sicilian Muscatidruni is known outside Italy as Moscato di Amburgo. Montuonico from Etna is known in Calabria as Mantonico di Bianco. Grecao and Ottavianello in Apulia are the same as French Sansot. Sangiovese is a grape whose offspring or siblings include grape varieties from Calabria, Montanicone, and Gaglioppo. Apulia, Susumaniello, Tuccanese di Turi. Tuscany, Foglia Tonda, Morellino del Casentino, Morellino del Valdarno, Vernaccia Nera del Valdarno. And Sicily, Carricante, Nerello Mascalese, Frappato, Perricone, Arbanello, Reliquia Bianca, Lucignola, Orisi. In the molecular characterization of some of Sicily's ancient grape varieties, genetic relationships between varieties have also been discovered, such as Grillo, son of Zibibbo, and Cataratto. The DNA kinship of Grecanico includes Cataratto, Pignoletto, or Grechetto di Todi, and Impibotte Romagnolo. Cataratto is closely related to other Sicilian grape varieties such as Frappato, Nerello Mascalese, Perricone, and some Tyrrhenian area varieties such as Mammolo and Garganega. In addition, first-degree kinships with Foglia Tonda, Morellini del Casentino, and Valdarno, and Brunellone confirm the hypothesis that this grape variety has a very important growing area in Tuscany and Corsica after the initial Calabrian Sicilian one.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, Cin Cin.